All right, and it's showtime. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very, very much for being here. I'm Hari-kirtana, your host, and it is always a great pleasure for me to be here with you, an honor to have you here with me, and so many of you are here, so thank you very, very much for spending a little bit of time this evening with me. I'm very happy to see you, and I hope that you are happy to hear me. If you can hear me, please press the little raise hand button that you see there. Very good. All right. I feel very happy to know that I can be heard. Let's take care of a little housekeeping, as is our usual way of doing things. You can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options. I'm betting you'll find those controls up in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You need not worry about your microphone or your video camera because I cannot see or hear you, even though you can see and hear me. If you would like to be heard, you can type a question into the Q&A box or preferably the chat window, and that way everyone will have the opportunity to share in your question. So thank you especially for those of you who are new to the satsang. It's very, very nice to welcome you to our community and this class. Last class, we are in chapter 15. We covered verses 12 through 15. Important things to know, more important things to know, and the most important thing to know. The important thing to know was how Krishna can be seen in the material world. In this particular set of verses, he starts to speak a little bit about how we can notice him or make associations with different aspects of the world and divinity. So the metaphysical function of yoga is yoga reveals the divine nature of the world. Here, Krishna gives some specific examples of how we can associate the illumination that we see in the material world to the spiritual nature, Krishna's specific spiritual nature. The more important thing to know is how Krishna enters into the material world and is sustaining all living entities within the material world. And then finally, the most important thing, which we'll review a little bit this evening, the idea that Krishna himself is the ultimate object of knowledge, the source of all knowledge, and the ultimate knower of knowledge. So we finished off with verse 15, which is an oft-quoted verse in the Bhagavad-gita. This evening, Krishna continues to speak to Arjuna, and we'll finish up the chapter with a look at the fallible and the infallible, and the distinction between those two, beyond infallibility, and our conclusion is the fulfillment of confidential knowledge. So that's what we're going to do this evening. And before we go any further, we will chant our invocation mantra. I will explain a little bit about this mantra and how it is pronounced and how you know how it's pronounced, especially for those of you who are new to the satsang. The dot over the M is a diacritical mark in what is known as transliterated Sanskrit, Sanskrit written in the Roman alphabet. And that dot above the M means that we close our lips. At the same time, we close the back of our tongue to the back of the roof of our mouth, as if we were wrapping our mouths around a little walnut. The bar across a vowel, in this case an A, indicates an open and slightly elongated version of that vowel, whereas without the bar, the same vowel would be sounded in a way that's a little more closed and truncated. So with that information, I will chant this mantra and you are welcome to chant it back. And then I'll explain what it means. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Translation. I offer my respects to the Supreme Person, the son of Vasudeva, who is the all-pervading transcendence. So Bhagavate, unto the Supreme Person, or that person who is in possession of all opulences. Vasudevaya, both meaning that which is all-pervading, and the person who is the son of Vasudeva, in this case, Krishna is the son of Vasudeva and the speaker of Bhagavad-gita. Therefore, we offer our respects to him. We are going to get into our verses this evening, but first, I went down to get my car inspected this morning. I knew you'd want to know that, so I'm sharing this with you. In November, that's, usually when this sort of thing comes around. And, I'd specifically arranged so that my registration for my car and my inspection for the car would be lined up, because there was one time when I didn't bother to look at the inspection sticker, and I drove all the way across town to get to the inspection place and waited in line. And then I found out that I didn't need to be there, that the whole thing was a great big waste of time, because my inspection was still valid for another year. And the guy at the inspection station recommended that I should get my registration for 2 years, and then the next time it came around, and then come back to the inspection station and get the inspection good for 2 years. That way it would be all lined up. I wouldn't make that mistake ever again. Good advice. Anyway, so I went this morning and I drove into the sun in crosstown traffic and got there, and there was no one there. This was early this morning. I thought it'd be somebody there, but it was like a totally off day, no one there. So I pulled right around, right up, and the guy came up to my car and said, "Let me show you how to read the sticker. You don't need to be here." And I thought, you got to be kidding me. Have I actually done this to myself again? I could have sworn that I had done exactly what the guy told me the last time, which was I just registered my car for 2 years, and now I was going to get an inspection that would be good for 2 years, and the whole thing would be lined up. I'd never make this mistake again. When he said, "Let me show you how to read the sticker," I thought to myself, well, if the first step is to look at the sticker, then I can probably take it from there. But I didn't look at the sticker. Now, I still don't know how I managed to bollocks this up, other than that it is just my nature to bollocks this sort of thing up. Because when I came home, my wife was not the least bit surprised that this had happened. She thought it was funny, but she didn't think it was anything particularly surprising about it. I somehow or other did not remember that I had gotten the inspection for 2 years last year, and I didn't remember to get the registration for 2 years last year, and I didn't know that I didn't need to go down to the inspection station, because I forgot that last year I had gotten a 2-year inspection. So it made me think of the verse that we covered last week, where Krishna says, "I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness." And so I thought about this verse and how I had not remembered, that I had no knowledge, that I was obviously forgetful. And I thought, okay, well, then maybe it's not my fault because Krishna didn't supply me with these things. Well, no, actually, that's not how this works. Because I can't blame Krishna for my not being smart enough to actually look at the sticker before I got in my car and drove down. And it's optional. I mean, Krishna can supply me with remembrance of him, or remembrance of anything else if he so desires, but it's not like he's got some obligation. But he does fulfill everyone's desire. We may recall earlier in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says, however one approaches me, I reciprocate with them in precisely that way. So whatever kind of knowledge we want, Krishna will provide. But I didn't express enough desire for this particular knowledge, nor did I do my part to make sure that I had it. Anyway, fortunately for me, since Krishna's instructions up to this point have kept coming back around to always think of me, then after I got finished putting my jaw back up so my teeth met once again, I remembered this verse, and therefore I remembered Krishna. So the whole thing was a great success. Yay! All right, maybe you're buying that, maybe not. But anyway, this is our illustration of the supreme person within the heart, who obviously has an excellent sense of humor. And now, on to our verses. Oh, but first, the practice of presence awareness is challenging, especially in a full life. We have all been there. All right, well, thank you very much for sympathizing with my ridiculous situation. Yes, I would like to think that my forgetfulness is a function of having such a full life. All right, on to this week's verses, covering 16 through 20 of the 15th chapter. I will read through the verses and then come back and we will look at each verse individually and take a deep dive into the significance of each of these verses. So Krishna is continuing to instruct Arjuna. Herein he says, there are two classes of beings in the world, the perishable and the imperishable. The perishable consists of all beings. The imperishable are those who are spiritually situated. Verse 17, there is yet another, the ultimate person, the supreme self, who enters and maintains this threefold universe as the inexhaustible Lord. Text 18, because I am transcendental, beyond both the perishable and the imperishable, I am celebrated in both the world and in the Vedas as the supreme person. Text 19. One who is unbewildered knows me as the supreme person. Thus, they are the knower of everything, and they offer their devotion to me with all their being, O son of Bharat. Last verse, verse number 20. I have now disclosed to you the greatest secret of the revealed scriptures, O sinless one. Wisdom arises in those who understand this, and their actions will be completely perfect. So now let's go back and look at each of these verses and look a little bit more closely. If at any time any of you have any questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat or in the Q&A if you so desire, and I will keep my eye out for any questions or comments that you would like to share. All right, so once again, verse 16. There are two classes of beings in the world, the perishable and the imperishable. The perishable consists of all beings. The imperishable are those who are spiritually situated. So let's break this down a little bit. Another way to translate the word for perishable here is alterable, changeable. So Krishna is making a distinction between those who are materially embodied, whom he calls all beings, which I find a little curious, and imperishable means those who are spiritually situated, or that is to say, residing in their own true form. So this is how Patanjali puts it in his Yoga Sutras. When stillness of the mind is accomplished, one sees or abides in one's own true form. Svarupe is the Sanskrit word that Patanjali uses. Sva, original, true, rupa, form. So the perishable consist of those who have a material form. Jiva is often used as the Sanskrit word to describe an Atma who is materially embodied. Now, you can use the words interchangeably, Jiva and Atma, but sometimes in some schools it's thought of as the Jiva Bhuta is the person in a material body, whereas an Atma is pure spirit, soul. So when Krishna says all beings, this refers to all embodied beings, whereas the imperishable are those who are spiritually situated. Spiritual form is not made of matter, and therefore it doesn't undergo the kind of changes that a material body goes through. So if we have a material body, we experience birth, growth, duration. We stay for some time. We may engage in reproduction. Then with time, there's dwindling, and eventually this body vanishes. And then there's a new body. So you have not only the alterable body in a single lifetime that goes from being a little baby to being a child, being a youth, to an adult, an older adult, a really old adult, and finally, someone who's ancient. Not only do you get all those changes, and anyone who has progressed in the direction of antiquity can see and feel the difference between the youthful body they once had and the antiquated body they've got now. But because we have already heard how the soul transmigrates lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, experiencing over and over again this cycle of birth, life, and death, we have multiple bodies in innumerable lifetimes. So matter is alterable. Spirit, on the other hand, is not. So one who is spiritually situated, that is, experiencing themselves according to their true spiritual nature, does not experience alterations. So this is what it means to be eternal. This does not mean that one who is spiritually situated is static. Krishna has described spiritual life as a dynamic state. There is no sense of spiritual life as someplace where nothing happens. Krishna has not denied spiritual individuality. In fact, he's confirmed it and will do so again. and the idea of spiritual relationships, which means spiritual forms engaging with one another in a spiritual atmosphere, a spiritual world. So at the beginning of this chapter, we heard about the upside down banyan tree representing the material world, the spiritual reality of which the material world is an inverted and distorted reflection, is the real tree that is being reflected by, say, a lake. So as below, so above. Whatever we find here, we must find in the source of here. And we have identified Brahman or Krishna as the source of the world. Therefore, in Krishna's world, whatever is present here in its distorted form is present in the original, but in its pure form. So I'm a person, you're a person, everybody who's a person is a person, and our personness is derived from the supreme person. And therefore, Krishna speaks about persons on a spiritual level, which implies relationship, because that's what it means to be a person. So any questions about this verse, please go ahead and share them. Meanwhile, the next verse is a verse that we are going to chant together. So this is verse 17, and I'll take a moment to explain a little bit more about the transliterated Sanskrit and the diacritical marks that give us pronunciation cues. A dot under an H means we're going to make a short stop on the vowel that precedes it unless the dot under the H is at the end of a word at the end of a line, in which case a short version of the vowel will be echoed back. So this is an idiosyncratic rule of Sanskrit that appears in this verse. Dot under an S is an SH sound, a regular SH sound. The bar over a vowel, I've already explained. A Y at the end of a word is a Y sound that merges directly into the vowel that begins the following word. So rather than being an E sound, a Y sound is almost a Y at the beginning of the next word. An accent mark over an S is also an SH sound, but rather than being a regular SH sound that we make kind of right behind our teeth, it's a lower pitched SH sound that's made from further back in one's mouth, all the way back by one's jaw. So you're going to curl your tongue up towards the back of the roof of your mouth and make the sound from your jaw. It almost feels like it's coming from the bottom of your tongue. And that looks like it will cover it. H sounds are sounded. So if you see an H after a consonant, you're just going to put some air into that. Also, every letter is pronounced. So the very first word has two T's together. So we're going to hit the brakes after the first T and then hit the accelerator on the second T. And there you go. So I will chant one line. You chant the line back if you like, and I'll chant one line at a time, give you some time to chant it back. Here we go. Uttama Purushastvanyaha Paramatmet Yadhurtaha Yoloka Trayam Avishya Bibharatyavya Ishvaraha. I let one get away. The dot under the R is not an sound, but you're going to curl your tongue up to the center of the roof of your mouth. So udhartaha as opposed to udhartaha. Anyway, I digress. The translation, once again, for this verse, there is yet another, the ultimate person, the supreme self, who enters and maintains this threefold universe as the inexhaustible Lord. So some of the specific words used here are Uttama Purusha. So Uttama means ultimate. Purusha means person. So we begin the verse with Uttama Purusha, the ultimate person. And then Paramatma. So Param, Atma, Eti. So let me go back to that. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, so at the beginning of the second line, this is actually a euphonically combined word that is actually three words. Parama, Atma, Eti. So Parama, supreme, Atma, self. When you combine those two words as a compound word, it becomes Param Atma, and the Eti is additional. So Param Atma indicates the supreme soul or the supreme self. And then Loka Trayam in the third line. So Loka means world or location. That's where the word location comes from, actually. Trayam, three. So there's an understanding in the Vedic literature that the universe has three parts. So hence threefold universe, or sometimes this is translated as the three worlds. They would be a upper planetary system, heavenly planets, middle planetary system, like planet Earth, and lower planetary system, hellish planets. And you can take birth in any of these different planetary systems. We do not see the universe laid out like this because the bandwidth of our vision with telescopes or any other technology really doesn't get out into these upper and lower planetary systems. Any astrophysicist can tell you that the vast majority of the universe is all made of dark matter and dark energy, and it's called dark because we can't see into it. So we don't know what's there. We only know what's in the very narrow bandwidth of what our senses are going to pick up. So with that in mind, I wouldn't be too quick to dismiss the idea of a universe in three general divisions in a literal sense, simply because an honest person will say, well, we really can't see the universe. You can also understand this in a symbolic way, and that also has some validity. In a previous class, we spoke about how starting with the self-evident meaning and basing any kind of symbolic understanding on the self-evident meaning gives us a complete picture of not only what the Bhagavad-gita is telling us and delivering to us, but also how we practically apply it. So in this case, the upper planetary system can be understood to be the realm of elevated consciousness, whereas the lower planetary system can be understood to be the realm of degraded consciousness. And our project in practicing yoga is the elevation of consciousness. In the case of the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna is recommending that one not only not allow consciousness to degrade so that one's life is experienced in a lower mode of being, but rather than elevating to a so-called heavenly material situation, one should bypass all of this and go directly to the experience of our eternal spiritual nature as a part, a fragmental part of the Supreme Spirit, the complete whole, whom Krishna has identified as his very self. And this Supreme Self, or the inexhaustible Lord, here the word Ishvara is used to indicate the Lord, and then inexhaustible, someone who can emanate unlimited amounts of energy and never run out, never even get low, like just a constant, endless, self-causing supply of inconceivable, unlimited energy, power, which is a pretty far out way to think of the Supreme Person as someone who has an unlimited supply of unlimited power. Kind of far out. So this idea is echoed in other places in the Vedic literature. There's an oft quoted verse from the Katha Upanishad and the Shvetasvatara Upanishad. The same verse appears in both in different places. The verse goes, Nityo Nityanam, Chaitanas Chaitananam. So Nityo, amongst all the eternal beings, Nityanam, there's one supreme eternal being. Chaitanas Chaitananam, like Chitta in the Yoga Sutras. Of all the conscious beings, there's one supreme conscious being. Eko Bahunam, Eko means one. That one is supplying the needs of all the others, giving the shelter to all the others, maintaining all the others. So here, Krishna is saying that he enters or maintains and maintains the threefold universe. So this is corroborated in a variety of other Upanishads and wisdom texts. So if you have any questions about that verse, let me know. Go ahead and type something into the chat or the Q&A, or any comments or realizations, insights that you would like to share. I would be very happy to hear those as well. Meanwhile, let's return to our verses, and this will be verse 18 of this cluster. Krishna continues, because I am transcendental, beyond both the perishable and the imperishable, I am celebrated in both the world and in the Vedas as the Supreme Person. So Krishna has gone back and forth. This is one of the reasons why the Bhagavad-gita is not always so easy. Because in the previous verse, he said there's another person, the Supreme Self, who does this. And then in the next, so he's talking about himself in the third person. Because in the next verse, he says, because I am transcendental, beyond both the perishable and the imperishable, I'm celebrated in both the world and in the Vedas as the Supreme Person. So this is just something to keep an eye out for. That when Krishna speaks about Brahman, he is Brahman and the source of Brahman, and our nature is Brahman, because Brahman is the spiritual substratum of existence. And we're a part of that. So that's our nature. But he speaks about Brahman as something other than himself. And then the Paramatma as well. He will speak about the Paramatma as an expansion of himself in the third person, but then come back and say he himself is the Supreme Person. And this way he indicates that he, as Bhagavan, the Supreme Person, whenever Krishna speaks in the Bhagavad-gita, his speech is preceded by Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, as opposed to Arjuna Uvacha or Sanjaya Uvacha or anyone else who has a line in the Bhagavad-gita. So he speaks about himself as the supreme person in the first person, indicating that he, as the supreme person, includes these other aspects of Paramatma, the localized expansion, and Brahman, the impersonal spiritual energy. So again, the word loke is in this verse, and it means world or location, but it changes its meaning here. So I've included both meanings in the translation. I am celebrated in both the world, loka, and in the Vedas as the supreme person. So there's a Sanskrit dictionary called the Nirukti Dictionary. And it's a dictionary that provides etymological interpretations. In other words, it explains how word meanings are derived. And according to that dictionary, the proximity of the word loke to Vede, indicating the Vedas, signifies a particular classification of scriptures called smriti. So there are two kinds of Vedic literature, and they're called smriti and shruti. So smriti literally means that which is remembered. And that's a body of literature that comes after the Vedas proper. They're written down, and the authors are usually credited. They would consist of different Puranas, Itihasas, which means history. Puranas means old stories, Tantras, other kinds of supplementary literature that get edited over time. So you can actually see the historicity of these literatures and how were they developed. They're authoritative scripture in so much as they conform to the original canonical Vedic literature known as Shruti. So Shruti means that which has been heard. And that is considered to be the breath of Vishnu. That is directly coming from divinity. And in its written form, it is, according to the tradition, said to be recorded by Vyasadeva, a literary incarnation, or what's called an empowered incarnation of Vishnu or Krishna. The Sanskrit word is Shakti-avesha avatar. So Shakti, power. Shakti-avesha, given the power, therefore an avatar. The power of divinity descends into a person who is then empowered to do something that otherwise no one would be able to do. In this case, catalog all of the Vedas. So there's a wide assortment of quotes from different Shruti texts. So the Shvetasvatara Upanishad, which we mentioned earlier, would be one of these texts, which confirms the same thing about the Supreme Being being the creator of everything, the knower of everything, the controller of everything, the cause of liberation from material existence for all embodied beings, etc. You get the Vishnu Sahasranam, that declares that the Supreme Lord is paramount among all beings, the Narada Pancharatra, the Vishnu Purana, the Chandogya Upanishad, etc., 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 all saying pretty much the same thing, which is that Krishna himself is known in the world and in the Vedic scripture as the Purushottama. So the Purusha, person, Uttama, ultimate, or the supreme person. So that is our corroborating evidence from various Vedic literature. And once again, if you have any questions about this, let me know. Comments, etc. We're going to chant 2 verses this evening. So while I wait for your questions and comments, move down to our next verse. two M's together like two T's. They're both pronounced, so you're just going to hold the M for double the amount of time. Two T's we've already gone over. The dot over the M we've already discussed, as in Om. And not too much to explain for this particular verse. Let's take a look at a question. Okay, a little lost. How do the Shrutis and Smritis relate to the Bhagavad-gita? That's quite all right. So the Bhagavad-gita has a kind of unique place because on the one hand, it's not one of the four original Vedas. So in that sense, it would be Smriti, post-Vedic literature, that which is remembered, something that has been written down. And if you take up an academic study of the Bhagavad Gita, you'll find that it has a history where things were, put together. For example, the Bhagavad Gita originally shows up as a chapter in the Mahabharata, and it's all just one chapter. It was divided up into the chapters we're looking at now later. So that would be an example of how the Gita is a supplementary literature that may change over time. However, because the Bhagavad Gita is understood to be spoken directly by Krishna himself, and Krishna is described in the Vedas as the Supreme Person, it is therefore in the same category as Shruti insofar as that it is heard as divine revelation. So traditionally speaking, we would understand the Bhagavad Gita to be holding a rather unique place in the Vedic literature in that it's not written by an empowered incarnation. If we accept that the author is Krishna, therefore it's technically Smriti, but it's also Shruti, but it's not technically Shruti because Shruti really means only the four original Vedas. And yet Krishna is saying, by all the Vedas, I am to be known, I'm the knower of the Vedas, and I'm the compiler of Vedanta. So you see how the Gita has a rather unique position in Vedic literature. I hope that helps. Annie, so Shruti is scripture and Smriti is tradition, what Western tradition would call them. Not exactly. Shruti is scripture of one category and Smriti is scripture of another category. They are both tradition. They both represent the Vedic tradition. And therefore they could be understood as traditional Orthodox yoga texts. They're just two different categories of scripture. The original Vedas, and in some respects, the Smriti is actually more important. Krishna himself speaks about how Arjuna shouldn't get caught up in the flowery words of the Vedas for the sake of executing traditional religious rituals for the sake of material gain. The Vedas are understood to be handbooks for how to operate the material world. They're like a user's guide for someone who's taken birth in the material world, and it tells you how it works. But the Smriti, starting with the Upanishads, gives us the philosophical understanding for why the world exists in the first place and why trying to make it work is not really the highest goal that you can shoot for. There's something beyond the material world, and all the problems of the material world can be solved by advancing one's consciousness to that state beyond the material world. So anyway, that's a little bit about both Shruti and Smriti. Are the sutras after the Bhagavad-gita? Yes, the Yoga Sutras chronologically appear after the Bhagavad-gita. Now, how you date this really depends on who you ask. The Bhagavad-gita is traditionally understood to have been spoken 5,000 years ago at the beginning of Kali Yuga. Academics who study this sort of thing will place the dating kind of all over the map, from 3,000 years ago to 1,500 years ago. It is generally agreed that the Yoga Sutras show up sometime after the Bhagavad-gita, but academics once again disagree by like 1,000 years. So it's really hard to pin down exactly when the Yoga Sutras show up. Both are equally true and important. They are equally true. I would say the Smriti is actually more important because it's the Smriti that gives us far more accessible information about the true nature of the self, the true nature of the world, and what to do about it. So the Shruti, or the Vedas themselves, explain how to do things. But the Smriti explains why there are things to do in the first place. And why is where you start. The first question we always want to ask is why. So from a philosophical standpoint, the Smriti is actually more important. So, which one was written by the rishis? So all of them were written by different rishis, wise people, those with knowledge by direct perception. So the rishis would be credited more with the Smriti insofar as it's written, whereas the Shruti was put in written form, presumably, according to the tradition, by Vyasadeva, who is the greatest of rishis. But it is also understood to be ultimately of divine origin. And Vyasadeva is the empowered incarnation who puts it on paper once we get to Kali Yuga, or the Iron Age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the particular season of time that began 5,000 years ago, wherein it is understood that human beings no longer have the capacity to remember stuff, and therefore things need to be written down. So we usually think of writing and the invention of writing as a sign of progress, of advancement of civilization. But from the standpoint of Vedic culture, it's actually a symptom of the decline of culture and of the human capacity for understanding. The four Vedas, Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda, and I'm missing actually the third one. I think Atharva is the last. I hope it'll come to me, but oh, wait a minute. I have something here that may actually have all those. Hold on for just a second. I will consult the book that I just happen to have right here. Rig, Yajur, that's the one I was forgetting. The Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda are the four original Vedas. And you're welcome, my pleasure. All right, 10 minutes, 2 verses. Let's see if we can do it. So I've explained the diacritical marks. I'm going to chant each line, and you will, if you like, chant each line back. Yo mam evam asum uddho janati purushottamam sarva vidbhajati mam sarva bhavina bharata Translation, one who is unbewildered. That is to say, one whose bewilderment has been knows me as the Supreme Person. Thus, they are the knower of everything, and they offer their devotion to me with all their being, O son of Bharat. We're going to take a close look at the Sanskrit for this verse. So, yo mum, yo is a very grammatically rearranged version of ya, anyone who. Mum means me. Evam, thus, asamuddaha, means without a doubt, someone whose doubts have been removed, someone who is no longer bewildered by the illusory power of material nature. Someone who's not a mudha, someone who is not unintelligent. So asam, indicating taking away confusion. So someone whose confusion has been removed, be another way to put this. Janati knows Purushottamam. So again, Purusha, person, Uttamam, Uttama, the supreme. So one whose confusion has been removed understands that I am the supreme person. Mom, me, it's me. I'm the supreme person. And with that understanding, Sarva Vit, you become the knower of everything. If you know the source of everything and the substance of everything, you know everything that's knowable, or all that is to be known. So you understand, it doesn't mean you're omniscient. It means you understand everything in relationship to its source and substance. If you understand the substance of clay, then you understand a clay pot. So similarly, if you understand Brahman, and you understand that Brahman is the substance of the world, then you understand the world. If you understand that the material energy consisting of the three qualities of goodness, passion, and ignorance that roll out into the 8 elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, that these are all separated material energies that are coming from and controlled by the Supreme Person, well, then you can look at the world and understand how it works and how to respond to it. So this is what's meant by the knower of everything. You aren't omniscient, but you just understand the nature of the world and the nature of our relationship with the world. Then, what's next? What's next? Bhajati mam. So bhaja, love. Bhaja, like a bhajan is a song of worship or a song of devotion. So bhaja, just like bhakti, devotion, offers devotional service to mam, me, Krishna. And then sarva bhavena, in all respects, or with completeness, with one's bhava, one's complete feeling, with one's whole being. You really put your whole self into the devotion that you offer to the Supreme Person, who Krishna is identifying as himself. So here is a really good example of working with the self-evident meaning and why that can be really challenging. Because this was what was challenging for me the second time I read the Bhagavad-gita. The first time I just didn't understand it at all. The second time I read it, I understood that it was telling me that this Krishna person was the supreme being, the Supreme Person, and I should be devoted to him. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I just wasn't buying it. And I didn't want to buy it because I really wanted to think that, I could meditate and become God. And it didn't occur to me until later that if I had to meditate in order to realize I was God, then I was not God and never would be. And so eventually I summoned up at least enough humility to accept in principle that this is what I should do. And I also summoned up the humility to accept the self-evident meaning of the text. That is to say, I wasn't going to get around what the text was saying by some speculative philosophical overlay that somehow made it mean something other than what it said. So this is challenging because it challenges our credulity. It challenges, our rational mind. And it really challenges our ego. So when you put rational mind and ego together, they will conspire to give you all the reasons you need not to accept the self-evident meaning of the text, and maybe to reject the Gita altogether insofar as it being any kind of authoritative literature, because it's just maybe not where we're ready to go. Challenging. Which brings us to our last verse for this evening, and just in time. So, I have now disclosed to you the greatest secret of the revealed scriptures, O sinless one. Wisdom arises in those who understand this, and their actions will be completely perfect. There's a particular phrase that Krishna uses in this verse, Guhya tamam shastram. Shastra means revealed scripture. Guhya means secret. Guhya tamam means most secret. So, all the way back in January, we looked at chapter 9 called the Yoga of Royal Secrets. And in verses 1 through 3, we covered that in class number 46. So for those of you who are new to the satsang and have yet to go all the way back to the beginning and work your way through all the classes, if you go to chapter 9, class number 46, you will find a class on the 4 levels of instruction in the Bhagavad-gita: general instructions, secret instructions, more secret instructions, and most secret instructions. And we will pick up here next week and review the 15th chapter. And I'll talk about how in this 15th chapter, Krishna has given us an elliptical review of each of these levels of instruction: general instruction, secret instruction, more secret instruction, and most secret instruction. Krita krityaha is the phrase Krishna uses to say that one's endeavors will be most perfect. In other words, what you do will be as perfect as you can get when you understand this most secret of all secrets of the revealed scriptures. So, a good reason for us to go through it again, because who doesn't want their endeavors to be most perfect? And that's all she wrote for tonight. If you have any more most perfect questions, please share them with me. I will be happy to take the time. I'm glad you will be, I'm glad you all think I'm a patient teacher, so thank you very much. Will I be starting this all over again in January? Actually, here's what's going to happen. We are currently at the end of the 15th chapter. I began teaching these classes on March 1st of 2018. And we are slowly working our way through clusters of verses in the Gita. And I understood that this would be about a 2-year project. So I expect to finish the Bhagavad-gita, end of chapter 18, sometime around the end of March or somewhere in April 2020. And then we'll be at the end. And there will be a complete library of classes recorded that all of you will be able to access henceforth and forevermore until the end of the world, you know, as long as Skynet doesn't show up and the internet just still retains its benign personality, then you will always have access to all of these classes, which will, I was hoping to get them done in 108 classes because that would just be so perfect, but I think it'll take a few more than that, given that we're up to 86. And that will be the end of this set of classes on the Bhagavad-gita. However, I will be doing other live classes on specific themes of the Bhagavad-gita and other yoga wisdom texts. So I hope that will be satisfactory. Will I be starting this all over again? Well, that's very kind of you to say. Thank you very, very much. You're very welcome, Kavita. My pleasure. All right, so what are we going to do next time? That's probably what you're wondering now, since we're already a little overtime here. So let me tell you, if you have any additional questions, please write to me, hari-kirtana.com, pronounced Hari-kirtana, if you really want to get technical or do your Dracula impersonation, Hari-kirtana. But Hari-kirtan will do, or just plain Hari. But anyway, that's where you can find me. Next week, we will finish up with a review of Chapter 15 in accordance with what we just spoke about the levels of secret knowledge, and begin Chapter 16, one of my favorite chapters, the yoga of differentiating between divine and demonic natures. We'll find out about the characteristics of saintly persons. We'll find out about the characteristics of demonic persons. And you can guess which one is better, at least according to Krishna. We'll cover the first 6 verses of this next chapter. So, that's all, folks. Thank you very, very much for hanging with me for a few extra minutes here and for being with me this evening, or whenever you are hanging with me and listening to this class. It's always a great pleasure for me to speak with you, an honor to have you here with me, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. And this time we will end meeting for all. All right, I hope you all have a very nice night.